Welcome, fellow learners. Today we're doing a deep dive into an area that honestly powers the entire global economy, but often remains kind of in the background.
It really does. We're talking about business-to-business markets, or B2B.
Exactly. This is where the real muscle of commerce operates. It governs how these multi-trillion-dollar organizations buy everything from, paper clips all the way up to petrochemical plants.
And what's just fascinating here is the sheer scale of it all, which I think we often overlook.
Completely.
To really frame this for you, you need to understand that significantly more money and a far, far greater volume of items change hands in sales to business buyers than they do to consumers.
That's an amazing thought.
It is. We're looking at giants like Oracle, which has to constantly innovate its marketing just to satisfy global enterprises, or General Electric, a known pioneer in these high-stakes long-term B2B relationships. Understanding this massive organizational buying mechanism is it's key to understanding global commerce itself.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to unpack the complete source material covering this. We're talking about the strategies, the rigid structures, and crucially, the human and emotional elements that govern these monumental decisions. We're addressing how this differs fundamentally from consumer buying, who actually makes the decisions inside that complex structure, and, how companies build these lasting, high-value partnerships in such a high-stakes environment.
And this is where it gets really insightful. We get to look at how the biggest brands in the world, the ABBs, the Caterpillars, the DuPonts of the world, navigate this incredibly complex terrain just to stay ahead.
Okay, so let's unpack this concept of organizational buying. It's more than just a simple transaction.
Oh, much more. It's really a decision-making process. It's where these formal organizations first establish a need for products and services.
So step one is just realizing they need something.
Exactly. And then, only then, do they go on to identify, evaluate, and choose among all the alternative brands and suppliers. It's a very systematic way for big companies to decide what they actually need and who they can trust to supply it.
And that system covers the entire business market.
The entire thing.
Right.
That includes every organization that acquires goods and services to use in the production of other products or services that they then go on to sell or rent or supply to others.
So we're talking agriculture, manufacturing, banking.
Utilities, services. It's the backbone of the economy. I mean, the scale is staggering. We're talking about roughly 6 million businesses with paid employees in the United States alone.
Wow. To make that scale a little more tangible, let's maybe look at a simple product we all use, like a pair of shoes.
Perfect example.
When you, the consumer, buy that pair of shoes, it's one simple transaction. But the journey to get that shoe to the shelf, it involves dozens of transactions.
Right. You have hide dealers selling to tanners.
Tanners selling leather to the shoe manufacturers, the manufacturers selling to wholesalers, and then wholesalers selling to retailers.
And every single one of those steps, often involving these massive, complex contracts, is a B2B transaction that supports your one single purchase.
And that's not even counting all the equipment, the software, the services that each of those companies has to buy just to keep their lights on.
Exactly. And the defining characteristics of this B2B world, they immediately set it apart from consumer markets. The first crucial difference is the customer base.
Fewer, but much, much bigger buyers.
Vastly larger. Think about the automotive sector. The financial health of major parts, suppliers like Goodyear for tires or Cummins for engines.
Or Delphi for control systems.
Right. Their health depends almost entirely on securing these major long-term contracts from just a handful of global automakers.
And I imagine when your customer base is that concentrated and that powerful, the standard, arm's length transaction model just goes right out the window.
Precisely. It forces a very close supplier-customer relationship. Suppliers aren't just delivering a product off a shelf. They are frequently expected to customize their offerings to individual business customer needs.
So it's about deep integration and long-term value.
It has to be. A powerful illustration of this is PPG Industries. They demand that their MRO, that's maintenance, repair, and operating suppliers, participate in their Supplier Added Value Effort program. They call it AVE.
And that AVE program sounds like a bit more than just a suggestion box.
Oh, it's a strategic challenge. PPG requires these suppliers to submit annual value-added or cost savings proposals that have to equal at least 5% of that supplier's total annual sales to PPG.
5%. So the supplier is constantly forced to innovate on behalf of the customer.
Constantly. The source mentions one supplier suggestion to the AVE program that cut costs for a lighting project by $160,000, and all they did was negotiate discounted prices for new fixtures and bulbs.
That moves the relationship from just being a vendor to being a strategic partner,
Exactly. It's all about continuous improvement.
which is a serious commitment, and one that demands a completely different level of expertise from both the sales force and the buyer. This brings us to another critical difference, which is professional purchasing.
Right. Unlike you or me buying groceries, business goods are bought by trained purchasing agents. They have to adhere strictly to formal organizational policies, budget constraints, legal requirements.
And they use these formal instruments that consumers never even see, like complex requests for quotations or RFQs, and these long, detailed purchase contracts.
These professionals are often part of organizations like the Institute for Supply Management. And what this means is that B2B marketers can't just rely on general advertising or impulse buys. They have to provide detailed technical specifications, robust data, and measurable evidence of their product's long-term advantages.
And the decision itself is rarely made by one person.
Almost never. There are multiple buying influences. You have buying committees, decision-making units, often made up of technical experts, procurement staff, and high-level management.
And because the products are so complex, the sales cycle must be incredibly long and demanding.
It is. McGraw-Hill once noted it takes, 4 to 4.5 personal calls just to close an average industrial sale?
That's the average. For multi-million-dollar capital projects, I imagine that sales cycle can stretch on for years.
Years. Which is why business marketers have to deploy not just a single sales rep, but entire, well-trained sales teams to cover all those different touch points within the organization.
Okay, so let's pivot now to the economics of it all, because these are the concepts that really reshape the market dynamics here. Let's start with derived demand.
Derived demand it's the foundational concept. The demand for business goods is entirely derived from and ultimately dependent on consumer demand.
So if the end consumer isn't buying, nobody in the supply chain is buying.
Precisely. Take the example of Continental Energy's coal business. Their ability to sell coal depends entirely on orders from power utilities and steel companies.
Right.
But those companies, in turn, only place orders because there's broader consumer demand for electricity, for cars, for appliances that need steel. If consumers, for whatever reason, decide to delay buying a new car or a washing machine,
The demand for coal just collapses all the way down the supply chain, and it has nothing to do with the price of coal itself.
exactly. So if consumer demand is soft, a B2B marketer can't just run a big ad campaign to stimulate total demand for their product. They can only fight harder for a bigger piece of a shrinking pie.
Which brings us to the second concept, inelastic demand.
Right? The total demand for many of these B2B goods is inelastic. What that means is that price changes generally don't affect the total buying volume, at least not in the short run.
So a shoe manufacturer isn't going to buy a ton more leather just because the price drops by 10%?
No, because they're constrained by how many shoes consumers are actually demanding. And on the flip side, if the price of a small but critical component like a specialized capacitor were to triple overnight,
The manufacturer can't quickly redesign their equipment to remove it, so they just have to absorb the cost and keep buying it.
they have to. But the real economic whiplash, as you put it, comes from the third point, fluctuating demand. This is often called the acceleration effect.
And this is the concept that really highlights just how volatile the B2B world can be.
This is where B2B planning becomes, a nightmare. Business demand is far more volatile than consumer demand, especially for new plant and equipment.
So let's talk numbers.
Here's the numerical leverage. A relatively small percentage increase in consumer demand, say, a 10% rise in washing machine sales, can trigger a much larger disproportionate increase in demand for the production equipment needed to build those machines.
Much larger.
Sometimes up to a 200% spike in demand for machine tools in the next period.
That's massive leverage. A 10% change in one market translates into a 200% panic in another.
Exactly. And conversely, a seemingly small 10% drop in consumer demand can cause a catastrophic, immediate collapse in business demand for new capital investment.
Because the existing capacity now seems sufficient, or maybe even excessive.
Right. And this extreme volatility, this acceleration effect, is why B2B firms have to be exceptionally careful about capacity planning. And is why their marketing efforts often focus on building long-term relationships that can smooth out these violent demand spikes and crashes.
It forces them to operate with a much greater sensitivity to macroeconomic forecasts than consumer goods companies ever would.
They have to. Two final differences before we move on. The historical tendency toward geographical concentration and a preference for direct purchasing.
Right. Buyers have been geographically concentrated, which helps cut down on selling costs.
Historically, yes. For years, over half of U.S. business buyers were clustered in states like New York, California, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Ohio, New Jersey, and Michigan. And while digitization has certainly broadened that reach, concentration is still a major factor in certain specialized industries.
And secondly, for those really complex or expensive items like mainframe computers or aircraft, business buyers tend to buy directly from the manufacturer.
They do. They bypass intermediaries or wholesalers to make sure they get the highest levels of specialized service and integration.
Okay, so now that we've defined the environment, let's get into the mechanics of how organizational buyers actually approach a purchase. Depending on the complexity, they face different levels of challenge, which are categorized as buy classes.
Exactly. And there are three main situations, starting with the simplest one.
The straight rebuy.
A straight rebuy is just a routine reorder of supplies. Think office paper, bulk chemicals, janitorial services.
Things you buy all the time from suppliers who are already on an approved list.
Right. The purchasing department handles this with minimal input from other departments. Often, the order is placed automatically. For the in-suppliers, the goal is just to maintain high quality and maybe propose an automatic reordering system to make it even easier.
And what about the out suppliers? The ones trying to break in, what's their strategy?
The biggest threat to the in-supplier here is just complacency, or maybe a momentary lapse in service. Out-suppliers are actively looking to exploit any small dissatisfaction. Or they might offer a completely new service component, like a better inventory system, just to try and break that routine.
So their goal is just to get a small initial order on a trial basis.
That's often it. Get a foot in the door and then work diligently to expand their footprint across the customer's organization.
Then the second situation is the modified rebuy, which seems like the beginning of real complexity and negotiation.
It is. In a modified rebuy, the buyer wants to change something. Product specifications, price, delivery requirements, some other key term.
Maybe the existing product is now too slow, or a competitor has come in with a much lower price.
Exactly. And this situation immediately brings in more participants from both the buyer and the seller side. The existing suppliers get very nervous and have to work hard to defend the account.
And the out suppliers see this as a clear, high-opportunity moment to present a demonstrably better, more customized offer.
That's their opening.
And finally, the new task situation. This seems like the seller's greatest opportunity, but it's also the highest risk scenario for the buyer.
This is the pinnacle of complexity. A new task involves buying a product or service for the very first time.
So a completely new enterprise software system or a massive security upgrade for the whole company.
Or specialized production machinery that will define their future capabilities. And because the perceived cost and the risk are so high, the number of participants just explodes.
Yeah.
The information gathering is intense, and the decision cycle is incredibly long.
The buyer has to go through the entire adoption cycle here.
The whole thing: awareness, interest, evaluation, trial, and finally, adoption.
I have to imagine the type of marketing communication must shift dramatically as the buyer moves through those different stages of a new task.
Oh, absolutely. Mass media and broad outreach are critical during that initial awareness stage, just to educate the market that the solution even exists.
And then salespeople have their greatest impact at the interest stage.
Right, where they can demonstrate capability and really engage in discovery. But then, technical resources and hard data are paramount during the evaluation stage. That's when engineers and finance personnel are scrutinizing every spec and the ROI.
So for these complex, multi-year new tasks, companies might even deploy specialized sales forces.
Many do. They use what are called missionary sales forces, composed of their most effective, highest-level technical salespeople who are, for all intents and purposes, consultants first and sellers second.
And that need to simplify the incredibly complex and manage the massive risk that comes with a new task that leads us directly to the concept of systems buying.
It does. Systems buying is where the business buyer prefers to acquire a total problem solution from one single seller, rather than having to piece together dozens of components from different vendors.
This concept originated decades ago with government purchases, right? Particularly for things like major weapons and communication systems.
That's right. The government would select a prime contractor, say a Lockheed Martin, who would then assume responsibility for soliciting all the bids, assembling everything, and guaranteeing all the necessary subcomponents from hundreds of second-tier contractors.
So the outcome for the buyer is a turnkey solution. They literally just have to turn one key to start the whole operation.
And sellers quickly realized this was a fantastic marketing tool. They branded it system selling. A variation on this is systems contracting, which is really common for managing MRO supplies.
MRO, that's maintenance, repair, and operating supplies.
Right. And here, a single supplier manages a buyer's entire requirement for, say, specialized lubricants or filters. And that includes managing the customer's physical inventory.
The Shell Oil example is a great illustration of how this benefits both sides.
It's perfect. Shell Oil doesn't just sell oil to its industrial customers. They actually manage those customers' oil inventories. They use data and sensors to anticipate when a replenishment is needed and then send it automatically.
So the customer saves a huge amount of money on procurement staff, inventory management, paperwork.
And Shell, the seller, benefits from steady, predictable demand and reduced operating costs because of the consolidated automated ordering. It's mutual efficiency.
But the source gives this one anecdote that shows true systems selling is about seeing the customer's need far beyond just the immediate product. It's about their macro-level goals.
This is the perfect illustration of market vision. The scenario involved bidding to build a new cement factory near Jakarta for the Indonesian government. A U.S. firm offered a standard, competent proposal: site selection, factory design, hiring construction crews, assembly, and then turning over the finished factory.
Which is strong, traditional system selling.
Very strong. But the Japanese firm won the contract, even though their price was higher and the initial proposal was more expensive.
So why did the government choose them?
Because the Japanese firm viewed the customer's need not as build us a factory, but as help us spur economic development.
A completely different problem statement.
Completely. They offered all the standard services, plus they would hire and train the local workers to run the factory. Plus, they would ensure the cement had an immediate market by exporting it through their own trading companies. Plus, they would then use that cement to build roads and new office buildings in Jakarta.
Wow. They integrated the factory into the entire ecosystem of economic growth.
Exactly. And that approach provided a far, far superior customer value proposition, which made the initial higher price completely irrelevant.
Okay, so if systems selling defines what is bought, the buying center defines who buys it. And that complexity is vast.
It is. We define the buying center as the decision-making unit, or DMU, of a buying organization. It includes all the individuals and groups who participate in the purchasing decision, share common goals, and this is critical, share the risks that arise from those decisions.
And we're not just talking about the purchasing agent anymore. One study noted that by 2005, there were 3.5 more people, on average, involved in a business purchase decision than in 2001.
Which means a typical center often involves dozens of people, and sometimes even external consultants. And marketers have to identify and target all 7 distinct roles within that center, understanding that one person can play multiple roles and multiple people can share a single role.
Okay, so let's walk through those 7 roles defined by Webster and Wynn, starting with the trigger point.
Number 1, the initiators. These are the people who realize a problem exists and request a purchase. Often, they're the users themselves. A lab tech needs a new piece of equipment. A sales manager needs better CRM software.
Then you have the users.
Right, the people who will actually operate the product or service. They are vital because they help define the operational requirements and often judge the ultimate performance.
Number 3, the influencers.
Influencers define the specifications or provide evaluation information. Technical personnel engineers, IT experts are key influencers here. They determine what standard the product must meet.
Then we have the deciders.
These people have the formal or informal power to decide on product requirements or on which supplier gets selected.
Followed by approvers.
Approvers authorize the actions of the deciders or buyers. This is often senior management or an executive committee for high-value items.
Number 6, the buyers.
They hold the formal authority to select the supplier and negotiate the terms of purchase. This is the role primarily held by purchasing agents, though senior managers often step in for major deals.
And finally, number 7, the gatekeepers.
The gatekeepers have the power to prevent sellers or information from reaching others in the buying center. The purchasing agent often acts as a gatekeeper, but so do receptionists, secretaries, or even IT staff who can block access or filter the flow of information.
This structure immediately guarantees conflict because each of these individuals, depending on their role, comes to the table with conflicting criteria for what makes a good purchase.
Oh, absolutely. The internal dynamics are a negotiation battlefield. Engineers prioritize maximized technical performance,
While the production staff just wants something that's easy to use and a reliable supply.
and the finance department is focused purely on economics, costs, and cash flow. Purchasing cares about operating cost and replacement terms. And if a union's involved, their officials will emphasize safety above all else.
So a marketer has to craft a proposal that somehow satisfies all of these competing metrics at the same time.
They do. And since individuals are making these decisions, it can't be a purely rational spreadsheet exercise. What about the personal motivations?
That's the human element that makes B2B so fascinating.
It is. In addition to the purely organizational needs, business buyers are influenced by their own personal motivations, their age, their income, their personality, their individual attitude toward risk. Webster argued that ultimately purchasing decisions are made by individuals who are motivated by maximizing the personal rewards the organization offers.
So things like job advancement, recognition, feelings of achievement.
Exactly. So a business buyer is effectively buying solutions to two problems at once: the organization's strategic, financial problem, and their own personal need for achievement and career security. The decision is both rational and emotional.
Right.
This insight led an industrial component manufacturer to a major discovery. They found that top executives at their small and medium-sized customers harbored these subconscious insecurities about adopting highly complex new technology.
Which makes perfect sense. They're the ones signing the multi-million-dollar check, and if the whole system fails, they're the ones who take the fall.
Precisely. So recognizing this deep-seated emotional risk, the manufacturer retooled its entire selling approach. Instead of focusing only on the technical specs, they started emphasizing how their product enabled the customer's employees to improve their performance, which thereby relieved the management team's stress and provided that essential emotional reassurance and confidence.
And this is why corporate branding has become so critical in B2B. A strong brand becomes a powerful form of that emotional reassurance. The case of SAS, the business analytics firm, demonstrates this perfectly.
SAS had market-leading software, but they were trapped. They were seen as a geek brand. Their success was limited primarily to engaging with IT managers and statisticians.
But they realized that business analytics had become a C-level strategic issue. They needed to reach the CEOs and the CFOs.
Exactly. So they undertook this massive rebrand to communicate strategic value, not just technical capability. They launched a new identity and the slogan, "The Power to Know."
A very powerful, simple message.
Very. And this campaign targeted C-level executives in top business publications, focusing on the strategic ability to make sense of complex information. They successfully transitioned from being just a technical vendor to a mainstream business decision-making support brand.
And that focus on clarity and emotional trust, the power to know what's happening, led to the company more than doubling its revenue.
It did. And it achieved high rankings as a desirable place to work. It was a total brand transformation.
NetApp provides another excellent illustration of this brand as reassurance strategy, especially in the digital space.
Right. NetApp, a Fortune 1000 data management company, had great technology, but a chaotic brand presence. They had multiple confusing names and websites they internally nicknamed Frankensites.
Not a good sign.
Not at all. So they standardized their name to NetApp, adopted the tagline, "Go further, faster," and undertook a massive digital makeover. The entire goal was to signal stability, reliability, and strategic partnership.
And the results were immediate and measurable.
The streamlined website, which communicated competence and focus, was estimated to increase sales leads from inquiries by fourfold. They embraced modern B2B communication using print, online ads, even social media channels like Facebook and YouTube.
Proving that B2B brand campaigns have to be just as sophisticated as consumer outreach, translating that technical superiority into corporate confidence.
That's it. So successful business marketers have to not only target the right type of firm, but they also have to know exactly which individual within that complex buying center needs to be influenced.
And Timken, the company that manufactures bearings and rotaries, provides a great example of this strategic market refinement.
It does. They realized their profits were dipping. And an extensive market study revealed that while they had massive sales to the auto industry,
Those high-volume customers offered very little profit potential because they were just too price-sensitive.
Exactly. So Timken strategically shifted his focus away from those high-volume, low-margin auto sales and aggressively targeted heavy processing, aerospace, and defense industries instead.
Sectors that require highly specialized, mission-critical components and are willing to pay a premium for guaranteed performance and reliability.
Right. And that targeted adjustment led directly to record revenue for them.
We also can't overlook the sheer scale of the small and mid-sized business market, the SMB market.
It's massive. The SMB market firms, with fewer than 500 employees, accounts for nearly 99.7% of all employer firms in the U.S. It's a huge B2B opportunity.
But it presents a unique challenge because these owners are often averse to long-range planning. They operate with an "I'll buy it when I absolutely need it" decision-making style.
They prioritize speed and simplicity above all else. So firms like IBM and American Express have to cater to that short-term, high-urgency need.
How do they do that successfully?
Well, IBM targeted this segment with its Express line of hardware and services, focusing on solutions that were simple to implement, fast to deploy, and scalable. American Express created its Open Forum, which not only offered discounts and services tailored for small businesses, but also encouraged record-keeping and financial management directly on their site.
So successful selling to SMBs requires simplicity and leveraging the internet for initial research.
But, and this is key, absolutely not neglecting direct contact and robust post-sale support to ensure those critical first purchases lead to loyal rebuy relationships.
And finally, there's the need to drill down past the purchasing manager to the ultimate end user. The Thomson Reuters case shows how that can yield significant growth.
It's a great case. Thomson Reuters, the global information services giant, successfully segmented its market by conducting ethnographic research on its ultimate customers.
So not the departmental managers who purchase the systems.
No, the individual brokers, the investment bankers, the legal professionals who were actually using the product every day. They weren't just asking managers what they needed. They were observing the brokers in action.
What did they find?
They identified new growth opportunities and developed new products based on this research, which included what they called the 3 minutes approach. This involved observing what users were doing 3 minutes before and 3 minutes after using a Thomson product to understand the entire workflow context.
That deep user understanding resulted in significantly higher revenue and profits.
It did. It demonstrates that even in B2B, the individual user experience is absolutely paramount.
So when we shift to the purchasing process itself, the guiding principle for business buyers is obtaining the highest customer value proposition, or CVP.
Right. They're seeking the highest benefit, package economic, technical, service social, in relation to the costs of a market offering.
So the marketer's job has to be strategic. They have to ensure the customer doesn't just see the product, but that they fully appreciate the long-term value differences and superiority over the competition.
And that's where the strategic process of framing comes in.
Tell us about framing.
Framing is vital. It involves giving customers a perspective that strategically highlights your firm's strengths and competitive advantages. And this is less about marketing hype and more about influencing how the customer views the full economics of the product's lifecycle.
So purchasing, owning, using, and ultimately disposing of the product.
The whole thing. If your product is more expensive up front, but it lasts twice as long and requires half the maintenance, the marketer has to frame that equation so that the initial price becomes secondary.
And that framing can extend far beyond the technical sheet to strategic imperatives, like supplier diversity.
Absolutely. Supplier diversity is a critical, non-price benefit that appeals to the social and strategic elements of the CVP. The pharmaceutical giant Pfizer views its supplier diversity program, which focuses on women, LGBT, minorities, and other groups, as essential for connecting with the values and mandates of its own customers and stakeholders.
They spend hundreds of millions with thousands of diverse suppliers.
And they even run mentoring programs. This demonstrates a commitment to value that goes way beyond the transaction itself.
This emphasis on strategic value has radically upgraded the role of the purchasing department itself, hasn't it?
It has. Historically, purchasing managed over half a company's costs, but often held a very low management position. Today, many have been elevated into strategic supply departments.
They've moved away from that adversarial price haggling.
And are now focused on obtaining the best long-term value from fewer, much better suppliers. They're leveraging electronic commerce heavily to streamline operations and increase efficiency.
Rio Tinto, the massive global mining leader, is a perfect example of this streamlining.
They used e-commerce to coordinate supplier needs, allowing orders to be placed and filled within minutes at the supplier's warehouse. They also shifted to a pay-on-receipt program, which shortened their payment cycle to around 10 days.
And Mitsui & Co. saw similar benefits.
Right, a major trading firm. They reduced the cost of their purchase transactions by 50%, just by moving their purchase orders and payments online. This upgrading of purchasing means B2B marketers have to meet that new standard. They have to deploy sales staff with the strategic and technical sophistication to match this new caliber of professional business buyer.
So now we can walk through Robinson's 8 stages, the buy phases, which form the fundamental Buygrid framework. But we should remember that these phases are compressed or even skipped in simpler transactions like the straight rebuy.
Right. The cycle begins with stage 1, problem recognition. This trigger can be internal, a machine breakdown, a realization of inefficient processes.
Or a new product requiring new components.
Exactly. Or it can be external, a trade show presentation, a compelling ad, or a proactive sales representative offering an innovative solution. B2B marketers have to be active in stimulating this recognition, often through strategic telemarketing or targeted sales calls.
Once that problem is recognized, the buyer moves to stage 2, general need description, and then stage 3, product specification.
Right. In the general need description, they determine the item's required characteristics, reliability, durability, quantity, delivery timelines. Then they develop the technical specifications. And this is the crucial stage for product value analysis, or PVA.
Let's pause on PVA because this isn't just about demanding a lower price. It's a full engineering and process overhaul.
It's a systemic critique. PVA involves a team studying components to determine if they can be redesigned, standardized, or made using cheaper production methods without adversely impacting performance.
The entire organization gets involved to make sure they aren't over-specifying a component simply out of habit.
Exactly. And every single dollar saved through that kind of efficiency drops straight to the bottom line, which is why organizations prioritize it so highly.
The HP example beautifully illustrates how PVA can integrate strategic goals like sustainability.
It's a perfect example. HP won an award for applying PVA to integrate clear design guidelines and checklists aimed at improving product recyclability. This wasn't just good citizenship, it reduced their end-of-life costs.
How to do it.
They used modular design to allow components to be easily removed and upgraded. They eliminated glues and adhesives by using snap-in features and mechanical fasteners. And they reduced the variety of materials used, often sticking to single plastic polymers. This dramatically reduces future cost and waste throughout the product lifecycle.
Okay, next is stage 4, supplier search. The internet has profoundly changed the sheer reach and speed of identifying potential suppliers.
The digital shift is complete here. Buyers are using trade directories, web ads, and crucially, these specialized electronic marketplaces that are organized in multiple forms.
Like what?
Well, you have catalog sites, like Grainger's massive e-catalogs offering millions of MRO items. Then there are vertical markets, or e-hubs, specializing in niche industrial products like plastics.com or chemconnect.com, where bulk chemical prices might change minute by minute.
Then you have the big auction sites.
Right, which manage complex, high-value assets. Ritchie Bros. Auctioneers for industrial equipment is huge. Back in 2009, 33% of their bidders were participating online, purchasing over $800 million of equipment over the web.
And we also have private exchanges and buying alliances.
Exactly. Private exchanges are where giants like HP and Walmart establish these exclusive closed networks, linking them only with specially invited high-trust suppliers. And buying alliances are where companies pool their purchasing power to command better prices, like 1SY&C, which is used by major retailers like Walmart, Target, and Lowe's.
So e-procurement offers these huge efficiency gains, but what are the risks that buyers are concerned about?
The advantages are obvious: shaving transaction costs and time, consolidating purchasing systems, increasing efficiency. But there are genuine concerns.
Like what?
Some procurement professionals worry that excessive reliance on these e-hubs and automated purchasing might erode the vital, high-trust supplier-buyer loyalty. It could reduce the willingness of suppliers to make those critical long-term specific investments we'll discuss later. And of course, security risks associated with sharing proprietary data on external networks are always a concern.
Following the search, we move to stage 5, proposal solicitation, and stage 6, supplier selection.
Right. Qualified suppliers are invited to submit detailed written proposals, and these proposals have to act as sophisticated marketing documents. They need to detail the technical specs, of course, but also articulate the value and the quantifiable benefits from the customer's perspective.
And after presentations, the buying center moves to selection, often using highly systematic methods. We mentioned customer value assessment, or CVA. How does a company actually quantify value in such a complex environment?
They use weighted score models, where various attributes, reliability, technical service, price, delivery are assigned weights, and suppliers are scored accordingly. CVA methods help them do this systematically.
But some methods are better than others?
They are. While simpler CVA methods are common, the more sophisticated ones like conjoint analysis, which measures how buyers trade off different features, or field value and use assessment, which precisely calculates long-term operational costs, yield much greater accuracy in determining the true customer value proposition.
And it's important that the key attributes aren't static, right? They change depending on the product.
They shift dramatically. If you're buying a simple routine order product, price and reliability are paramount. But if you're buying a complex procedural problem product like a new copying machine or a specialized medical device, the most important attributes become technical service, supplier flexibility, and long-term product reliability, because failure is simply too costly.
Okay, so even with all this focus on weighted scores and CVA, the reality is that B2B buyers still spend a massive amount of time haggling over the sticker price. How does a B2B marketer successfully counter that endemic price pressure without just racing to the bottom?
They have to strategically shift the conversation. They have to move it from the initial price to the total cost of ownership or the life cycle cost of using the product.
So they cite the superior intangible value of services, like specialized know-how or guaranteed reliability.
Exactly. The goal is to elevate their status from a commodity vendor to a key supplier, which makes the price a secondary factor. And the strategic shift leads directly to solution selling.
A powerful antidote to commoditization. This is where the seller guarantees a quantifiable business result, not just a product.
Right. Solution selling is built around proving value beyond the product itself, and it generally takes three distinct forms.
Okay, what are they?
First, solutions to enhance customer revenues. A classic example is Hendrix UTD, a feed supplement supplier. They didn't just sell feed, they employed sales consultants to help farmers manage their herds,
Which resulted in an incremental animal weight gain of 5 to 10%.
directly boosting the farmer's revenue. Second, solutions to decrease customer risks. ICI Explosives specialized in formulating safer ways to ship and handle explosives used in quarries, reducing the customer's operational and liability risks.
And third, solutions to reduce customer costs.
Right. W.W. Grainger, the industrial supply giant, embeds its own employees on-site at customer facilities to manage materials and stockrooms, directly reducing the customer's materials management and inventory costs.
The Lincoln Electric Guaranteed Cost Reduction Program is maybe the most audacious commitment to solution selling I've ever heard of.
It's an incredible display of confidence in their value. When a customer insists on a price match with a competitor, Lincoln Electric and its distributor might guarantee that, over the next year, they will identify and implement cost reductions in the customer's plant that will meet or exceed the price difference the competitor was offering.
So they're putting all the risk on themselves.
They are, but they have confidence in their expertise. For example, when the Hall and Binkley Company demanded a $10,000 price savings, Lincoln Electric leveraged its expertise to find systemic efficiency improvements in the customer's manufacturing process that resulted in a six-figure saving.
So they turned an adversarial price haggle into a strengthened, profitable partnership.
Exactly. And this also ties into the concept of risk and gain sharing.
How does that work?
It's a crucial tool for high-value relationships. A supplier might promise a set level of operational savings. If they fall short, they make up the difference. If they exceed the target, the supplier gets to participate in the extra savings.
So it requires the supplier to partner deeply, helping the customer build a historical database and agreeing on precise, auditable methods for measuring costs and benefits.
It really deepens the commitment and trust.
Okay, so after selection, we move to stage 7, order routine specification. A massive ongoing trend here is the reduction in the sheer number of suppliers major corporations maintain.
This is a cost control and a quality control measure. Companies like Ford, Motorola, and Honeywell have cut their supplier bases by anywhere from 20 to 80%.
They're seeking fewer, higher quality partners.
Right. Partners who can handle larger systems, achieve continuous quality improvement, and agree to lower prices annually while integrating closely on product development. There's even a trend towards single sourcing for certain components, though buyers have to weigh that against the risk of complacency or interruption from strikes or disasters.
And routine orders are increasingly managed through blanket contracts or stockless purchase plans.
Right. Instead of issuing periodic purchase orders, buyers are shifting to these long-term blanket contracts where the seller holds the stock. And the ultimate evolution of this is vendor-managed inventory, or VMI,
And in VMI, the supplier is granted access to the customer's inventory data.
and takes full responsibility for monitoring levels and automatic replenishment. Plexco International AG, a supplier to automakers, implemented VMI with 40 of its suppliers, and it resulted in significant time and cost savings for Plexco. It even freed up former warehouse space that they could then use for manufacturing.
And finally, we have Stage 8, performance review. This is where the buyer evaluates the supplier's performance.
Which might involve getting subjective feedback from end users or calculating the aggregated costs of poor performance to determine the adjusted true cost of the purchase. This feedback loop is essential for managing the relationship.
Which brings us to the spectrum of B2B relationship dynamics. These relationships exist on a continuum, right?
They do, defined by the importance and complexity of the supply and, crucially, the level of trust involved.
Our sources categorize these B2B relationships into 8 types, ranging from simple transactions to complex partnerships. Let's look closely at the trade-offs involved in some of the more complex ones.
Sure. The spectrum moves from purely transactional relationships, like basic buying and selling and bare bones up, through more competitive ones like contractual transaction and customer supply, where competition really dominates cooperation.
So where do we see that shift toward a true partnership?
That happens in the top half of the spectrum. You get to cooperative systems where partners are united operationally, sharing logistics and information, but they still lack deep legal or structural commitment. Then you hit collaborative, which is characterized by high trust, strong commitment, and a real willingness to work toward mutual long-term goals.
And the final 2 demonstrate the risk of a specific non-mutual dependence.
Indeed. Mutually adaptive relationships are tricky. Both parties make many relationship-specific adaptations, like custom equipment or training, but they might lack that strong, fundamental trust. And finally, you have customer is king, where the seller adapts completely to the customer's complex needs, but expects little adaptation or long-term cooperation in return.
This closer vertical coordination and integration, which is necessary for stronger ties, it creates this massive financial risk that's tied to specific investments. This is where the system can break down spectacularly.
It can. Specific investments are those tailored expenditures like custom tooling, equipment, specialized training protocols that lock a firm into a particular relationship and create extremely high switching costs.
Like when Xerox worked with suppliers to develop customized components that reduced copier manufacturing costs by up to 40%.
Right. Those suppliers received volume guarantees, but they also made highly specific investments that were completely worthless if Xerox ever decided to walk away.
And that vulnerability opens the door to the systemic risk known as opportunism.
Opportunism is a major, major concern. It's defined as some form of cheating or undersupply relative to an implicit or explicit contract. It can be blatant, deliberate misrepresentation, or it can be passive.
Passive how?
Like a supplier simply refusing to adapt to a buyer's changing technological needs, knowing full well that the buyer's locked in due to those high switching costs.
The famous Ford and Lear Corporation example cited in the source shows a high cost of this broken trust.
It's a classic case. Lear Corporation was a supplier for the 1996 Ford Taurus. They committed to a contract that they allegedly knew they could not fulfill. They were essentially betting that Ford would be too invested in the specific tooling and component design to pull out once production started.
That opportunistic behavior led to missed deadlines, non-functional parts.
Major operational disruption for Ford. Dealing with opportunism requires massive resources for control and monitoring that could otherwise be used productively. High trust and a focus on long-term reputation are the only real antidotes.
So following that intensive look at risk and relationships, we really need to circle back to how corporate branding and technology have become these indispensable tools for offsetting these risks and building trust in the B2B world.
Absolutely. And Accenture is a phenomenal global case study in leveraging brand credibility in B2B.
After separating from Arthur Andersen, the consulting firm had to find a globally trademarkable name and launch it in just 3 months.
They chose Accenture, meaning accent on the future. And this wasn't just a name change. It was an incredibly sophisticated global campaign targeting senior executives. Within a year, Their brand equity increased by 11%.
And critically, the number of firms inquiring about their services shot up by 350%.
Right. The brand immediately communicated independence, stability, and a future focus.
Then they shifted their positioning to emphasize high performance, famously using Tiger Woods as a spokesperson for 6 years because he symbolized high performance internationally.
And that worked until the late 2000s, when personal scandal made Woods a distraction. Focus groups confirmed this, so Accenture executed an immediate pivot. They dropped Woods and launched a $50 million campaign featuring high-performance animal analogies.
The surfing elephant being the most memorable one.
It was, paired with the line, "Who says you can't be big and nimble?" It demonstrated remarkable brand agility and reinforced the crucial role of corporate brand credibility, expertise, trustworthiness, and likability in securing client trust, especially in sensitive consulting engagements.
Technology is also completely redefining how firms engage prospective customers, moving far beyond the traditional long white paper or the dry trade ad.
The digital shift has forced B2B marketers to think like entertainment providers. Telabs, which competes with giants like Cisco, decided to focus its campaign Inspire the New Life on the customers and users.
And research showed that those users preferred engaging short-form media over traditional long documents.
So they embraced it. They chose 6-minute video technology primers and podcasts over 30-page white papers. This generated over 100,000 video downloads and achieved 3 times the exposure of a traditional ad-based campaign for the same cost.
And we see this shift everywhere. Chapman Kelly nearly doubled its revenue just by optimizing its website search engine visibility.
And Emerson Process Management demonstrates the sheer lead generation power of targeted content marketing.
What do?
Emerson makes factory automation systems, and they run this highly specific, engaging blog focused on factory operational war stories. That blog attracts 35,000 to 40,000 monthly visitors, and it generates $5 to $7 million leads a week.
A week, wow.
And we see it with other companies too. Makino uses industry-specific webinars. Cognos, which is now IBM, ran BI radio podcasts that attracted 60,000 subscribers and directly or indirectly led to $7 million in deals. B2B firms are extremely comfortable with and adept at leveraging these specialized technology channels.
Beyond the profit-seeking organizations, B2B marketers also have to understand the unique constraints of the institutional market.
Right. This segment, schools, hospitals, prisons, nursing homes, is defined by low budgets and captive clienteles. Their buying objective is purely service provision, not profit maximization.
But it's also not just about absolute cost minimization either, because poor quality like bad food or inadequate care can severely hurt their reputation.
Exactly. So food providers like Heinz will customize their packaging and pricing specifically for the unique needs of these high-volume, cost-sensitive institutions.
The Aramark example in the corrections segment shows how innovation can still occur even under these tight constraints.
That's a great example. Aramark, a major food service provider, moved beyond simply buying standard stock. They found huge competitive advantages by collaborating with unique partners who understood the chemistry of proteins,
which allowed them to formulate meals that lowered costs while maintaining or even improving quality.
By replicating this process with 163 different customized items, Aramark drove down food costs by 5 to 9 cents per meal, which far exceeds the typical 1-cent reduction you usually find in that very tight market.
And finally, we have to look at the massive government market, which is arguably the single largest B2B customer in the world.
Without a doubt. Government organizations are major buyers. The U.S. government alone bought $220 billion in goods and services in 2009, processing over 20 million individual contract actions annually.
And governments typically require suppliers to submit detailed bids and often, by law, have to award contracts to the lowest bidder.
They do. Although for complex R&D projects or high-tech solutions, they'll often use negotiated contracts.
What are the main systemic challenges for vendors trying to sell to this market?
The complaints are universal. Staggering bureaucracy, massive regulation, and seemingly endless paperwork. Procurement staff often shift roles frequently, which makes long-term relationship building difficult.
And governments, particularly in Europe, often favor domestic nationals, which creates challenges for multinationals.
It does. So vendors have to heavily focus on rigorous cost justification and demonstrating verifiable past successful performance, especially with other government organizations.
But fortunately, even governments are trying to adopt some B2B efficiency.
Yes. Reforms are aiming to simplify procurement by increasingly buying off-the-shelf commercial items, moving communications online to eliminate paperwork, using web-based forms and electronic procurement cards, or P-cards.
And requiring all vendors to register in centralized databases like the central contractor registration.
Right. Despite the challenges, major players like Gateway, Rockwell, and GE maintain these dedicated government marketing departments specifically to anticipate needs and navigate that complex bidding process.
And we can't wrap this up without revisiting GE, the acknowledged pioneer in high-tech B2B marketing.
GE is the absolute master of B2B branding at scale. They operate 5 massive divisions, from energy and aviation to healthcare and transportation. And their brand campaigns like Imagination at Work, Eco-Imagination, and Health Imagination serve to unify this incredibly diverse offering under one single powerful GE brand identity.
It communicates innovation, credibility, and high-tech solutions globally.
It does. And their approach to pricing their aircraft engines, power by the hour, is the ultimate realization of all the B2B value concepts we've been discussing.
Explain how that works.
It's brilliant. Instead of airlines purchasing a multi-million-dollar engine outright and then having to manage unpredictable high maintenance costs, they pay a fixed fee each time they run the engine power by the hour.
And GE handles all the maintenance, guarantees reliability.
They essentially assume all the operational risk. This fundamentally lowers the airline's total cost of ownership, cements a high-trust, long-term relationship, and ensures GE remains an indispensable strategic partner. It's the perfect counter to commoditization.
Okay, we have achieved a really deep level of detail today, mapping the entire landscape of organizational buying.
We have. We covered the distinct economic characteristics of B2B markets derived, inelastic, and that dangerously fluctuating demand. We detailed the mechanics of buying situations, from the routine straight rebuy to the complex new task that demands systems selling.
We also dissected the influential and often conflicted structure of the buying center, defining all 7 key roles, and walked through the 8 buy phases of the purchasing process, noting how digital technologies like VMI and eHubs have completely transformed efficiency.
And crucially, we highlighted the necessity of moving beyond just transactional pricing towards solution selling, where value is guaranteed, risk is shared, and these high-trust relationships are maintained to counteract the threat of opportunism that specific investments can create.
If we connect all this to the bigger picture, the story of B2B marketing is really about shifting from simple, price-focused transactions to these complex, integrated partnerships.
Where value is measured not just by the technical spreadsheet, but by shared risk, strategic integration, and mutual long-term benefit. It is a massive mechanism driven by logic, but ultimately it's highly influenced by the emotional needs of the individuals involved.
So you are now armed with a thorough understanding of how organizations acquire goods and services. What does this all mean for you, the learner? We saw how pioneers like GE use systems like Power by the Hour, and how brands like SAS and Accenture leverage sophisticated messaging to appeal directly to the emotional side of the B2B buyer, the need for achievement, for confidence, for reassurance.
Right.
So given the truly massive complexity and the high financial stakes of many of these B2B purchases, where is the ultimate crucial line between logical, technical necessity, the spreadsheets proving ROI, and the sheer emotional reassurance that a strong, trustworthy corporate brand provides? Something to mull over until our next deep dive.